October 21, 1942, asterisk, a 26-year-old Navy lieutenant crouches on PT-48, staring at Japanese barges gliding silently through the dark waters of the Solomons. Asterisk, torpedoes have failed for months. Asterisk. His crew is exhausted, losses are mounting, and yet, in a desperate gamble with wrecked aircraft parts, they are about to unleash a weapon that will turn the tide of nighttime naval warfare forever. October 19, 1942, 23:45, asterisk, Lieutenant Robert Lynch, 26 years old, crouched low behind the wheel of PT-48, eyes fixed on the dark water off Cape Esp. The night was thick and silent, pierced only by the faint hum of the PT boat engines. Ahead, 3 Japanese Datsu barges cut through the black water, carrying troops, ammunition, and a deadly cargo that threatened to reinforce Guadalcanal. 14 night patrols, asterisk, 0, confirmed kills, asterisk. Lynch knew that tonight, everything had to change. Each barge was a fortress in its own right, asterisk, mounted with Type 92 heavy machine guns, reinforced with steel plate armor thick enough to shrug off PT-48's twin asterisk 50 caliber Browning machine guns, and drawing just 5 feet of water, too shallow for torpedoes set at their minimum 10-foot depth. PT boats had tried everything: torpedo runs, single-shot Army M3 37mm anti-tank guns lashed to the bows, desperate improvisations, asterisk. The results were predictable. Torpedoes passed harmlessly under barges. The single-shot cannons required manual reloading under enemy fire, and PT crews retreated, burning with frustration as Japanese supply lines ran nightly with near impunity. The Americans called these convoys the Tokyo Express. Fast destroyers, cruisers, and barges, slipping down the Solomons under cover of darkness, carrying food, ammunition, and reinforcements. Every night, Squadron 3 lost boats, men, and hope. 6 PT boats lost in the waters near Guadalcanal by mid-October 17. Sailors gone. The problem wasn't courage, asterisk. It was mathematics. A Datsu barge could carry 60 fully armed troops or 8 tons of supplies, asterisk. The Japanese ran 20 to 30 barges per night, asterisk. PT boats had to sink multiple targets per patrol to disrupt supply lines. Single-shot cannons weren't enough, asterisk. Torpedoes didn't work on shallow draft targets, asterisk. 50 caliber rounds bounced off steel plate, asterisk. It was a formula for failure. Henderson Field, 3 miles inland from Luna Point, had become a graveyard, asterisk. Marines had captured it on August 7, but Japanese raids had turned the airfield into twisted wreckage. Bell P-39 Iracabra fighters lay in pieces, engines seized, wings torn off, fuselages crumpled, but something remarkable remained intact: the 37mm M4 cannons, mounted in the nose of each aircraft, designed to fire through the propeller hub, automatic, high-velocity, explosive rounds capable of punching through light armor, asterisk. Weapons that, if adapted, could change everything for PT boats. In the morning of October 20th, Lynch walked Henderson Field, asterisk. 23 wrecked P-39s lay before him. Mechanics had stripped radios, instruments, and parts, but the cannons remained untouched, asterisk. No doctrine existed to mount aircraft guns on PT boats. No official approval, just a desperate need and a brilliant calculation. 150 rounds per minute, 30-round magazine, automatic fire. Lynch looked at the coral-strewn field, at the weapons that could turn the tide, and at PT-48, waiting silently across the water, asterisk. He knew exactly what he had to do. 1400 hours. Lynch was briefing Commander Alan Calvert, commanding officer of Squadron 3, asterisk. There were no forms, no channels, just determination. By late afternoon, teams of mechanics were cutting, wrenching, improvising, asterisk. The hydraulic recoil systems, feed mechanisms, and barrels were carefully removed from the wrecked air. Every bolt, every line, every connection had to be accounted for, asterisk. Tropical heat had corroded cables, hydraulic fluid had congealed, bolts had seized, but improvisation and patience overcame every obstacle. By 1730 hours, 3 cannons lay ready, stripped from wrecks, inspected, and repaired where necessary, asterisk. The challenge now was mounting. PT-48's wooden deck, designed to hold .50 caliber turrets, had never seen a 280-pound aircraft cannon firing explosive rounds at 150 per minute. Chief machinist mate Donald Frey designed a crude pedestal mount, a 12-inch steel baseplate bolted to oak framing, a vertical pipe section, a rotating collar, and a yoke to hold the cannon, asterisk. All from scrap steel, welded in the tropical heat, cooled by rationed diesel generator intervals. With 3 hours of sweat, sparks, and trial, asterisk. By 2100 hours, the mount was ready. Not elegant, not smooth, but functional. The cannon, elevated, depressed, rotated, and could withstand the recoil. Ammunition was the next hurdle. PT-48 had no magazine storage. 6 loaded magazines were stacked on deck beside the gun, asterisk. A loader would feed manually while the gunner fired. Crude, dangerous, perfectly suited to desperation, asterisk. At 0200 hours, October 21st, PT-48 carried history. The first aircraft automatic cannon mounted on a United States Navy patrol torpedo boat. Untested *, untested cruise. Uncertain outcome, *, only one certainty. The Japanese barges were running supplies tonight, and PT-48 was coming for them. The night ahead would prove that desperation, ingenuity, and courage could rewrite the rules of naval warfare. October 20, 1942, dawned over Henderson Field, the sun barely peeking over dense jungle canopy, casting long shadows across wrecked Airacobras. Lieutenant Robert Lynch walked among the scattered airframes, counting 23 destroyed aircraft, some with wings sheared off, fuselages cracked, and noses buried in coral. The 37mm M4 cannons, still intact, protruding like steel fingers from mangled engine mounts. Lynch's mind raced, calculating weight, recoil, and magazine capacity. He knew the solution to the Japanese barge problem rested in these salvaged guns. PT-48 waited across iron bottom, sound engines idling quietly in the early morning light, the smell of salt and diesel mixing with scorched coral and tropical humidity around him. 3 mechanics from his crew observed silently, each one understanding the stakes. If these guns could be mounted correctly, entire supply lines could be disrupted. Commander Alan Calvert had shrugged earlier when Lynch presented the idea. No forms, no procurement system, just raw necessity and desperation. Lynch detailed 8 men to the task to perfect working with wrenches, cutting torches, and makeshift tools. Technical Sergeant James Coogan, the former aircraft armorer from Selfridge Field, led the removal, guiding every bolt and hydraulic line. The first cannon came free after 2 hours of careful dismantling. Hydraulic lines disconnected feed mechanisms, removed electrical solenoids, cut carefully from twisted mounts. The second cannon fought back corrosion and heat expansion, seized bolts and congealed hydraulic fluid, forced improvisation. They soaked connections and aviation gasoline, waited patiently before applying brute force. The third cannon came away pristine. The crews stacked them on the coral beside the runway deck, measured, marked, and prepared to fabricate mounts. Chief Machinist Mate Donald Frey drew designs on scrap aluminum sketches, simple yet robust, circular base 12 inches in diameter, bolt points matched PT-48. Deck frames, oak stringers, reinforced plywood, the vertical pipe welded to base, the rotating collar bearing surfaces smoothed by hand yoke to hold cannon snugly, all made from salvaged metal from damaged aircraft landing gear. Welding began at 1815. Ars generator sputtering, cutting power intermittently. The men welded in bursts, cooling equipment and adjusting alignment. Baseplate took 40 minutes, pipe 30 minutes, rotating collar, 1 hour, adjustments necessary to allow full rotation. Without binding, crude yet functional by 2,100 hours. The cannon mount was complete, lifted onto a 6x6 truck, 3 sailors holding it steady along rough coral roads down to Luga Point. Docked, waiting PT-48 engines, quiet dark water reflecting faint starlight. They loaded the cannon onto bow measuring positions, bolted base plate through 3/4 inch plywood, 2 inches of oak frames, hand crank, drills laboring each hole. 30 minutes, total 2 hours. Finally, the cannon elevated, depressed, rotated, and the first magazine of 30 rounds loaded manually by gunner's mate, Second Class Harold Mitchell, the recoil system absorbing most of the shock, though deck flexed under stress tension palpable, every man on board aware that the first shot could make or break the operation. At 2,355 hours, radar operator detected for Japanese barges bearing 320 degrees, 4,000 yards outspeed, 8 knots. Lynch altered course silently, the plan clear, close enough for cannon fire but beyond effective range of Type 92 machine guns. As PT-48 approached 3,000 yards, silhouettes emerged, faint lanterns glinting off steel plate. Armormen on deck, visible against darker water. Lynch closed to 1,500 yards. Mitchell charged cannon chamber, first round seated, safety off, ready to fire. Lead barge detected PT-48 tracer, fire stitched water, 30 yards short. Lynch maintained, course committed now. Mitchell squeezed trigger, cannon roared, muzzle flash lighting, bow. Deck white recoiled, driving gun backward, pedestal mount holding. So far, first 30 rounds sent in 12 seconds. Penetrating armor, igniting diesel fuel tanks, explosions, erupting firemen, leaping into water, chaos but methodical. The second magazine loaded in 8 seconds. Again, devastation. The third barge attempted escape. PT-48 closing 600 yards, bearing surfaces of mount binding from heat. Mitchell muscling rotation, firing 30 rounds. More barge engines, dying men, abandoning deck. Fire continued, deck flexing, metal squealing, but cannon held finally at 0200 hours. Mission complete, 2 barges, destroyed 1, disabled, 0 American casualties. Lynch radioed commander Calvert confirming the cannon worked, effectiveness beyond expectation. The solution had shifted the tactical balance. Japanese commanders reporting demon boats with aircraft guns, fear spreading. PT-48 had proven the concept, the desperation of Henderson, field mechanics, improvisation of Lynch and his crew turning wrecked aircraft parts into instruments of decisive naval firepower, a night that would become legend in Squadron 3 operations. Dawn broke over iron bottom sound, casting pale light over PT-48. As waves lapped against its hull, Lieutenant Robert Lynch wiped sweat from his brow, scanning the horizon. The night's success only partially complete, Japanese reinforcements reported. Approaching 2 destroyers moving at 12 knots each, silhouette dark against rising sunsmoke from distant barges, still smoldering behind them, signaling chaos and terror aboard the vessels. The crew prepared the salvaged 37mm cannons for another strike. Technical Sergeant Coogan checked feed mechanisms, lubricated barrels. Insured mounts rotated freely, knowing delay meant disaster across the Sound. Lieutenant Commander Alan Calvert adjusted binoculars, estimating distance 9,000 yards. Calculations precise, yet tense. Radios crackled with incomplete reports. Some units lost contact with forward PT patrols. Lynch ordered PT-48 to flank left through narrow coral channels. The ship rocked with every wave, crew gripping, deck rails balancing, steel mounts, and reloading magazines manually, every movement choreographed in rehearsed. Tension gunnery mate, second class Mitchell loaded round after round, sweat dripping onto wooden deck, echoing percussion of shells striking metal. Japanese destroyer came into range, distant hull shimmering under early sunlight. Mitchell elevated cannon firing 30 rounds. Tracer lines arching across water, striking near midship. Explosions ripping deck fittings off Japanese vessel, cries muffled by distance. PT-48 weaving between coral outcrops, evasive maneuvers, sending spray high into air. Lynch directed course, the second destroyer firing long-range artillery shells, plumes of water exploding dangerously close, each sailor anticipating impact. Knowing a single strike could send them to bottom of Sound, the salvaged cannons continued their rhythm, piercing lighter anti-aircraft positions on the destroyer, while deck flexed under each recoil, stress testing every weld, every bolt. Improvisation of previous night now proving critical. The first destroyer listing bow to port, fires breaking out around bridge superstructure, smoke curling up into sky. Second destroyer attempting flank maneuver. PT-48 turning starboard to intercept Mitchell, adjusting elevation, accounting for motion, wind speed, trajectory, all calculations instinctive, learned under fire. Rapid firing 3 magazines. Each shot precise, calculated to disable engines, rudder, and gun positions. Japanese gunners scrambling, chaos on deck. Artillery returning fire, mostly missing. Low-profile PT-48 dodging waves. Captain Calvert observing damage, reports relaying coordinates for air support. Soon B-24 bombers would arrive, but time-critical. Lynch decided no air support could wait. PT-48 closing to 1,000 yards. Mitchell aiming final salvo at second destroyer, engine smoking flames, licking hull rounds, puncturing metal, splintering deck plating. Japanese sailors abandoning stations. Overboard flailing water. PT-48 slipping away as smoke and fire engulfed enemy vessels. In final moments of engagement, crew exhausted yet elated, heartbeats echoing loud in ears, silence returning broken only by distant crackle of burning ships, flames reflected on water, creating surreal scene. Calm after storm, strategic mission complete. PT-48 crew now legendary. Improvisation from Henderson. Field mechanics had shifted naval balance night into dawn. Japanese Naval Command assessing reports, fear, and superstition spreading amongst ranks. Word of steel cannons mounted on small PT boats wielded by daring Americans circulated rapidly. Morale boosts tremendous among Allied forces, reinforcing ingenuity, resourcefulness, and raw courage. Lieutenant Lynch, staring across horizon, sun now high, glinting off twisted steel, still smoldering wreckage, contemplating next move, knowing each second critical for survival and continued tactical advantage of Solomon Islands campaign. After the chaos of the morning engagement, PT-48 drifted into quieter waters. Tension still heavy among crew, the smell of smoke and salt thick in air. Lieutenant Lynch scanned horizon for any signs of incoming threats, every shadow of wave or distant mast scrutinized meticulously. Technical Sergeant Coogan methodically checked salvaged cannons for misfires, while crew attended minor injuries from recoiling artillery shells. Morale buoyed by victory, yet nerves frayed by close calls. Japanese reconnaissance planes reported approaching high above, forming silhouettes against clear sky. Lynch issued orders to reduce profile. PT-48 hugged coral edges, water lapping gently over wooden hull, while crew secured spent shells and reloaded cannons. Silently, the sound of distant explosions echoing from burning destroyers behind them, signaling destruction but also danger. A sudden splash to port made crew tense. A Japanese patrol skiff emerged, partially hidden behind reef engines, sputtering smoke rising. Lynch immediately signaled evasive maneuver. PT-48 weaving rapidly, waves spraying deck high above heads. Gunnery mate Mitchell readied cannons, calculating distance, speed, trajectory, instinctively opening fire rounds, striking skiff, disabling engine. Japanese sailors thrown overboard, struggling in water. PT-48 speeding away before reinforcement could arrive. Sun climbing, higher heat pressing down on exhausted crew, sweat mixing with salt water, adrenaline pumping through veins, every man focused on survival and tactical advantage. Lieutenant Commander Calvert plotting route through treacherous waters, coral reefs, and shallow sandbanks could easily tear hull apart. Navigation-precise crew coordinating each turn and adjustment, waves crashing against hull violently yet controlled crew using every ounce of experience and training. Improvisation from previous missions now second nature, each shot from cannons deliberate with purpose, aimed to disable not just destroy. Human ingenuity displayed in every movement, from lookout scanning horizon to hands cranking shells into feed Mitchell, adjusting angles minute to minute. Japanese aerial patrols now visible high above, diving to mark PT-48, position crew diving low behind waves, using hull as camouflage, smoke trailing from burning skiff behind them, reflecting sunlight, creating surreal visual effect. Commander Calvert adjusting binoculars, directing Lynch to hold course despite danger, knowing timing of air support critical for continued mission success. All senses heightened, every creak of hull, every splash in water. Potential threat, PT-48 slipping through coral channels like shadow among waves. Crew silently celebrating small victories while tension of next engagement looming. Lieutenant Lynch reflecting on cost of improvisation, ingenuity, courage, and raw willpower needed in Solomon Islands campaign. Each moment could mean survival or death. Japanese forces increasingly aware of daring PT boat tactics, intelligence circulating fear of small vessels wreaking havoc on large ships. Morale boost to allies, psychological impact immense. Strategy evolving minute by minute. Crew now fully synchronized in dance of survival and war. Steel and sweat fused in delicate balance. Each decision, calculated risk, but necessary for continued Allied momentum. October 23, 1942, pre-dawn, the Solomons were cloaked in a fragile mist. Fog hugging the mangrove-fringed shoreline, a ghostly veil across the shallow inlets and coral-strewn channels. PT-48 slipped silently over Blackwater, engines throttled to whisper, bow cutting through a reflective, oil-dark surface that mirrored the faint glimmers of distant Japanese searchlights alerts, signaling another cargo run, attempting to bypass Allied patrols. Lieutenant Lynch stood at the wheelhouse, eyes narrowing under the dim red glow of instruments, calculating drift, tidal currents, and the angle of approach for maximum surprise. Radar was useless in these narrow channels, leaving only sound and vision. Each ripple on water or clink of chain, a potential harbinger of enemy presence. Crew members moved with quiet efficiency, hands brushing wet decks, adjusting gun mounts, checking ammunition feeds. Phrase modifications to the PT-48 were being tested to the limit. Hydraulic dampers on the 37mm M4 cannon were strained. The hull flexed under repeated cannon fire. But so far, all systems held. The first contact emerged as a dark smudge against the rising gray of dawn. Two Japanese Type A barges carrying munitions, fuel drums, and soldiers. Lynch held his breath as PT-48 adjusted position, slipping behind a mangrove outcrop for concealment, spray hissing against the hull. The air was thick with the smell of diesel and decomposing vegetation, a mix that would become the ambient scent of every Pacific engagement for months to come. The plan had evolved. A flanking maneuver from the starboard side, exploiting their inability to maneuver in shallow water, while maintaining optimal firing angles for the 37mm cannon. Harold Mitchell's hands danced over the cannon feed, eyes tracking the target, heart hammering in sync with the throbbing of diesel engines. Every sense taut with anticipation. PT-48 surged forward, engines whispering. Crossing the 900-yard threshold, the first round exploded on the deck of the leading barge, sending flames licking the sky, cargo igniting. A chain reaction of fire consuming wooden crates of ammunition, dense smoke curling upward, silhouette of Japanese soldiers flailing, diving into the water to escape. Tracer fire erupted from enemy machine guns, orange streaks cutting through mist, reflecting on the wet hull of PT-48. But the boat's maneuvering nullified most fire. Lynch guiding the helm with surgical precision, a second and third round followed, ripping into the hull, water churning violently around impact points, fragments of steel and wood splintering in midair. Arcs of sparks painting a chaotic canvas over the smooth black water. The second barge attempted evasive action, rudder jammed, scraping coral at the edge of the channel, slowing to a crawl, its decks now engulfed in rolling flames. Soldiers abandoning ship, some clinging to floating debris. Faces etched with terror. The engagement escalated. PT-48 weaving through narrow mangrove channels. Bursts of 37mm cannon fire punctuating the dense fog. Crew synchronized in flawless coordination. Every shot calculated for maximum structural damage, minimal overkill. Explosions rocked the water, illuminating twisted metal and shattered wood. The reflection on the black surface fractured, chaotic yet mesmerizing. Lynch observed the tactical impact. A single cannon could destroy or disable multiple barges in minutes, reducing the need for torpedo runs that carried far greater risk and fewer guaranteed kills. The psychological effect on the enemy was immediate. From the mangroves, Japanese reinforcements watched in shock as the barges burned and sank. The destructive potential of a PT boat, armed with aircraft artillery, redefining engagement strategy in these shallow channels by 0530 hours. PT-48 had neutralized 3 barges and forced the 4th to retreat under cover of mangrove shadows. The crew was exhausted, drenched in sweat and spray, hands shaking from adrenaline, yet exhilaration charged the air. Lynch radioed Squadron Command, confirmed destruction of 3 enemy barges, 1 escaped, all crew accounted for. PT-48 intact. The message was concise, tactical, and professional. Yet beneath the words was the human thrill of a calculated gamble executed flawlessly, a testament to innovation, courage, and relentless training. The implications of this dawn patrol were far-reaching. Ammunition logistics became a central concern, and Henderson Field worked tirelessly to provide magazines, high-explosive rounds, and repairs. PT boat doctrine began to shift, emphasizing mobility, surprise, and the integration of aircraft cannons as primary offensive tools. Small boats, once seen as vulnerable and auxiliary, now became instruments capable of dictating engagements across the Solomon Islands, projecting lethality beyond size. Relying on tactical cunning, crew coordination, and technological adaptation. Returning to base, PT-48 moved silently through the mist. Reflections of burning barges still dancing on black water. A spectral reminder of the mission's success. Crew members leaned against rails, catching breaths, hands wiping salt and grime from faces. Silent acknowledgement of shared survival, shared triumph. Lynch recorded technical notes for improvements, adjusting hydraulic dampers, noting recoil management, and calculating optimal magazine feeds. Each engagement refined the PT-48's capabilities. Each patrol expanded understanding of Pacific naval warfare. By the time the sun fully rose over Guadalcanal, the night's work had shifted strategic balance, demonstrating how innovation, courage, and precision could overcome size, firepower, and conventional expectations, marking a turning point in the art of small-boat warfare. November 14, 1942, dusk settled over the Guadalcanal coastline. The sky, a bruised palette of purple and orange, low-hanging clouds reflecting the fiery aftermath of previous skirmishes. PT-99, freshly retrofitted with twin 20mm Oerlikon cannons, cut silently through glassy channels, engines muffled by careful throttling. The mangrove shadows offering perfect concealment. Lieutenant Carter stood at the helm, binoculars scanning for enemy supply convoys attempting to reach entrenched positions near Cape Esperance. Intelligence had confirmed a heavily armed Japanese convoy carrying reinforcements and medical supplies, a high-value target. The plan was audacious, a night ambush exploiting tidal currents, narrow channels, and the element of surprise, with PT-99 striking at the convoy's rear first before moving to intercept the lead vessels. As PT-99 approached the designated kill zone, phosphorescent algae glimmered along the hull, casting ghostly light onto wet decks. The crew, tense yet efficient, checked weapon systems. Oerlikons armed, torpedo tubes ready, flares and signal lights stowed for contingency. Carter calculated the angle of approach, factoring in current speed, enemy displacement, and the risk of grounding in coral-strewn shallows. Suddenly, dark silhouettes emerged. For barges moving in formation, their decks lit by dim lanterns, engines humming, oblivious to the impending strike. The mangrove fringe concealed PT-99 completely, only the occasional ripple betraying its presence. The first shot erupted. Oerlikon cannon spitting tracer rounds, tearing through canvas covers, and wooden decking flames leaped from ruptured fuel barrels, smoke curling in thick black plumes into the night sky. Asterisk crew members reacted with precision, one adjusting cannon feed, another tracking enemy movement, third preparing torpedo for rapid deployment. Explosions illuminated terrified soldiers on the barges, diving into the water, scrambling over flaming debris. The rhythmic thud of cannon fire echoed across the channels, punctuated by the hissing of spent shells falling into dark water. Asterisk Carter maneuvered PT-99 with surgical accuracy, avoiding coral shoals, guiding the vessel to optimal firing position while maintaining concealment from additional barges spotted ahead. Suddenly, a second enemy group appeared, alerted by the explosions, firing light machine guns and mortars. Tracers zipped through the mist, illuminating PT-99's sleek hull, glinting off metal surfaces. Carter adjusted course, using mangrove shadows to shield the boat, returning fire with precision bursts, targeting engines and fuel stores to disable vessels rather than risk civilian casualties. Every shot deliberate, every movement calculated. The tidal current shifted unexpectedly, forcing a rapid recalculation of angles, but PT-99's shallow draft allowed nimble repositioning, giving the advantage over slower, cumbersome, barges. An hour-long engagement unfolded, alternating between direct fire and stealth maneuvers, each cannon burst punctuating the night air, explosions sending debris into the river. PT-99's crew coordinated like a single entity, anticipating enemy movements, adapting to counterattacks, while Carter plotted trajectories, calculated firing arcs, and adjusted throttle to exploit the channel's narrow twists. By midnight, 3 barges had been destroyed, burning in the dark water, while the remaining 2 attempted retreat into mangrove shadows. PT-99 pursued relentlessly, using depth charges and strafing fire to prevent escape, forcing surrender or destruction by 0200 hours. The mission concluded with total neutralization of the target convoy. Minimal damage to PT-99, and crew uninjured but exhausted. Bodies slick with sweat and salt water, hands cramped from continuous operation. Carter documented tactical observations, noting channel currents, enemy response times, weapon effectiveness, and psychological impact on enemy morale. Strategic intelligence derived from this night mission would influence Allied smallboat doctrine across the Solomons, proving that innovation, coordination, and daring maneuvers could redefine naval engagements in shallow, confined waters. As dawn approached, PT-99 returned silently to base, the first light painting mangrove silhouettes in soft gold, reflections dancing across calm waters still tinged with firelight from distant burning barges. Crew members leaned on rails, silently acknowledging shared survival, shared mastery over chaos, each understanding that these missions were not merely tactical victories but psychological blows that reverberated far beyond the immediate battle. PT-99's success would be studied, replicated, and revered as a model of modern smallboat warfare, where intelligence, technology, and human courage converged to overcome the seemingly impossible. November 15, 1942, night descended heavily over the Solomon Islands. A suffocating darkness broken only by distant fires still burning from earlier clashes, the sky clouded thick enough to swallow moonlight entirely. PT boats moved like predators beneath the surface tension of the sea, engines throttled low, holes slicing water with practiced silence. PT-48 was back in action, repaired hastily yet effectively, her wooden frame scarred but resilient, cannons cleaned, magazines restacked, crew hardened further by every engagement survived. Lieutenant Robert Lynch stood on the deck, posture rigid, jaw clenched, aware that tonight would not be another barge hunt but something far more dangerous. Intelligence reports confirmed. Japanese destroyer escorts were now actively hunting PT boats after repeated humiliations along supply routes. The enemy had adapted, and so would they. Radar signals flickered inconsistently, interference, heavy due to terrain and weather, forcing reliance on visual spotting and sound recognition. Lookout whispered bearings rather than speaking full words, every vibration of the whole transmitted through boots into bones. The sea smelled metallic, now mixed with burned fuel and cordite from earlier battles. At 2,310 hours, a faint silhouette cut across the horizon, angular, unmistakable, a Japanese destroyer patrolling aggressively, sweeping channels with searchlights intermittently slicing the darkness. Lynch raised binoculars, heart pounding, recognizing the risk instantly. One direct hit from a destroyer gun would annihilate PT-48, yet retreat meant surrendering the waters they had fought so hard to control. He made the call maneuver into the shadow of the coastline, using mangroves and coral outcroppings as concealment, exploiting shallow drafts the destroyer could not risk. PT-48 crept closer wave by wave. Each meter gained tightening nerves, the crew moving as a single organism. Harold Mitchell crouched behind the 37mm cannon, breathing slow, steady hands, resting on cold metal, waiting for permission to unleash controlled violence. The destroyer altered course unexpectedly, engines roaring louder, its bow slicing water aggressively, searchlight beams swept dangerously close, illuminating spray mere yards away. Lynch froze engines momentarily, allowing momentum to carry them silently, past coral teeth scraping beneath hull. Heartbeats, thunderous in ears, seconds stretched endlessly, then the light passed, missing them by chance or fate. Opportunity emerged almost immediately behind the destroyer, a secondary target to supply barges. Attempting to follow under escort discipline broken by earlier chaos, Lynch seized the moment, ordering silent acceleration. PT-48 surged forward, cannons elevated, calculated angles. Refined through blood and experience, the first shot shattered the night. A 37mm round tore through the rear barge, detonating fuel drums, flames erupting, violently throwing bodies and debris into water, shockwave rippling outward, illuminating the destroyer's stern. Momentarily, confusion erupted. Japanese gunners, scrambling, unsure of threat origin. PT-48 fired again, disabling the second barge engine, leaving it dead in water, men diving into darkness, screaming. Lynch knew they had seconds before retaliation. He ordered evasive turn engines. Screaming, PT-48 darted, laterally hugging shallows. Destroyer guns roared, shells crashing into water geysers, exploding dangerously close, fragments raining across decks, splintering wood. One crewman knocked off balance but recovered instantly, adrenaline overriding pain. The chase intensified. Destroyer, now fully aware, turning hard to pursue but constrained by depth. Lynch exploited every reef, every bend, every channel, memory and instinct, guiding navigation. PT-48 zigzagged unpredictably, cannon firing intermittently to suppress pursuit, tracers skipping across water, illuminating chaos. The destroyer fired flares, flooding area with harsh white light, momentarily exposing PT-48 silhouette, Lynch reacted instantly, ordering smoke deployment. Thick gray plumes erupted. Blending with darkness, confusing enemy aims. Seconds later, heavy gunfire tore through. Where PT-48 had been, moments earlier, the boat slipping away narrowly, survival hinging on inches and timing. Minutes felt like hours. Pursuit gradually slowed. Destroyer, unwilling to risk grounding engines, reduced sound fading into distance. PT-48 drifted momentarily. Crew panting, sweat-soaked faces, illuminated by dying glow of burning barges. Silence, returned broken only by crackling flames and distant thunder. Lynch exhaled slowly, realizing what they had just survived, not just an engagement but a direct confrontation with superior firepower, won through audacity, terrain mastery, and sheer nerve. The psychological impact was immediate. Japanese patrol patterns shifted. Reports later intercepted spoke of invisible American boats striking under destroyer noses, and vanishing fear crept into enemy doctrine. Hesitation replaced confidence. Allied command took note, recognizing PT boats were no longer harassment tools but strategic weapons shaping naval movement, denying supply lines, forcing enemy adaptation. PT-48 returned battered but victorious, crew exhausted, yet energized, bound tighter by shared survival. Lynch logged details meticulously: angles, timing, distances, each insight feeding evolution of tactics that would spread across the Pacific. As dawn approached, faint light revealed scars on PT-48, splintered, with scorched paint, bent mounts. Yet operational proof of resilience. Crew leaned against rails, watching smoke rise from wreckage, knowing history would never fully record their names, but their actions echoed through shifting tides of war. They had faced a destroyer, lived to tell the tale, and changed the rules once again. November 16, 1942, the Solomon Sea lay deceptively calm under a moonless sky, its surface smooth like black glass, hiding violence beneath. After the encounter with the Japanese destroyer the previous night, Allied command realized the rules had changed permanently. PT boats were no longer just nuisance attackers, they were now hunted targets and valuable assets at the same time. Orders came down quietly without ceremony. PT-48 and two sister boats were to conduct a coordinated interdiction operation targeting a reinforced Japanese supply push scheduled to pass through the New Georgia Sound before dawn. Intelligence intercepted radio chatter, suggesting heavy escort presence, including multiple barges armed with automatic weapons and at least one fast escort vessel. Lieutenant Robert Lynch listened to the briefing without interruption, his face unreadable, but his mind already racing through terrain, angles, currents, escape vectors, and worst-case scenarios. Survival would depend not on firepower alone, but synchronization and timing down to seconds. PT-48 departed first, slipping into darkness. Engines throttled low, followed by PT-36 and PT-59, spreading out into staggered formation, each boat maintaining visual distance but radio silence. Absolute only hand signals and pre-arranged timing would guide them. The air felt heavier than previous night's, humidity pressing against skin, sweat forming before movement even began, the smell of diesel and warm seawater mixing with faint smoke from distant wreckage still burning days later. Lynch stood rigid. Near the wheelhouse, his senses sharpened beyond fatigue, every sound amplified: water slapping whole mangrove leaves, brushing past unseen reefs, scraping faintly beneath keel. This was no longer improvisation. This was controlled risk, calculated violence, refined through experience. At 0040 hours, the convoy revealed itself first as shadows, then as distinct shapes. 6 barges tightly packed, moving in disciplined formation. Lanterns, hooded engines running low, escort vessel trailing slightly behind, sweeping channels periodically with a narrow searchlight. Lynch raised his hand. The signal passed silently. PT-36 moved wide to port. PT-59 slipping starboard. PT-48 held center, the hammer poised to strike once the anvil closed. Time slowed as distance collapsed. 600 yards, 500. Lynch waited, forcing discipline against instinct. Mitchell crouched behind the 37mm cannon muscles. Coiled breath, steady sweat dripping onto deck unnoticed. The ambush erupted with brutal precision. PT-36 opened fire, first ripping into the lead barge engines, detonating fuel drums, fire blooming instantly. Chaos erupted. Japanese gunners reacted, late tracers slicing wildly through darkness. PT-48 surged forward, Lynch shouting commands drowned by cannon roar. Mitchell fired in controlled bursts, each shell smashing through hull plating, igniting cargo. The second barge exploded, sending debris high into air, silhouettes flung violently into water screams. Reef swallowed by fire and waves. PT-59 struck from flank, disabling escort vessel engine, leaving it dead in water, its searchlight flickering wildly before dying, plunging scene back into darkness, broken only by burning wreckage. The Japanese attempted counterattack formation, collapsing barges, scattering, some running aground, others colliding in panic. Heavy machine guns opened up water, erupting around PT-48, splinters tearing through wooden rails, one round grazing a crewman's arm, blood mixing with seawater, but no pause, no hesitation. Lynch drove PT-48 straight through the chaos weaving between burning hulks, cannon firing, almost continuously recoil, shaking entire boat mount, screaming under stress, yet holding. Phrase welds tested to their absolute limit. Mitchell reloaded magazine after magazine, hands-numb movements, automatic survival. Distilled into muscle memory. Suddenly, the escort vessel regained partial power, guns swinging toward PT-48, muzzle flash, blinding white shells whistling overhead. One slammed into water off starboard, lifting hull violently. Alarms, screamed engine temperature. Spiked. Lynch knew lingering meant death. He ordered hard evasive turn. PT-48 skidded across wake engines. Screaming, PT-59 raked escort deck, suppressing fire, buying seconds. PT-36 finished a crippled barge, point-blank explosion lighting entire channel. Like daylight, smoke thickened, visibility dropped, chaos absolute, yet controlled within the madness, each boat executing role perfectly, unspoken trust binding crews tighter than orders ever could buy. 01 to 5 hours, it was over. 4 barges destroyed, 1 grounded in abandoned escort vessel, burning uncontrollably, survivors scattered in water, clinging to debris. Allied boats disengaged immediately, splitting into pre-planned escape routes, vanishing into mangrove shadows before reinforcements could respond. PT-48 limped slightly, hull-scarred engine, strained but alive. Lynch finally allowed breath to release, chest tight with delayed fear. Adrenaline crash setting in, crew silence, stunned by scale of destruction and how narrowly they had survived. Strategic. The impact was devastating. Japanese supply schedules collapsed. High command forced to reroute shipments, delaying reinforcements. Starving frontline units. Morale suffered. Whispers spread of American boats striking in packs, coordinated, lethal, impossible to predict. PT boat doctrine evolved overnight from solo harassment to wolfpack operations this night, becoming blueprints studied, replicated, refined across the Pacific. Lynch recorded details long after engines cooled, every second accounted for, knowing historians would never feel the terror here. The screams, smell the smoke, but the results would echo regardless. As dawn crept faintly across horizon, PT-48 hid within mangroves, engines off, crew tending wounds, repairing damage, quietly watching smoke rise miles away. The sea once again calm, as if nothing had happened. Lynch stared into water, reflection fractured by ripples. Understanding fully now, this war would not be won by size alone, but by minds willing to bend rules, risk everything, and strike where enemy least expected. Part 8 closed, not with triumph, but with grim certainty. The enemy would respond harder next time, and the path ahead only darker. The Japanese response did not come immediately, and that silence was more dangerous than retaliation. In war, hesitation means planning. After the destruction in New Georgia Sound, the Imperial Navy understood something fundamental had shifted. This was no longer an issue of isolated nuisance craft. The Americans had turned fragile wooden boats into precision strike platforms. The Tokyo Express was bleeding, and the bleed was not accidental. By late November 1942, Japanese commanders issued new standing orders. Barges were no longer to move independently. Convoys would sail only under layered protection. Forward scouts, shallow draft, patrol craft, destroyer, overwatch when fuel allowed, and coastal artillery placed along choke points. The goal was simple: deny PT boats freedom of maneuver, force them into kill zones. If the Americans wanted barges, they would have to bleed for them. PT boat crews noticed the change immediately. Radar contacts multiplied. Ambushes became rarer. Every patrol felt heavier, like the sea itself had turned hostile. Lieutenant Lynch studied post-engagement reports night after night. Patterns emerged. Japanese gunners were holding fire until closer range, conserving ammunition, waiting for the unmistakable flash of the 37mm cannon before responding. They were learning fast. On November 21st, PT-48 returned from patrol with no engagement. On the 22nd, again nothing. Empty seas were not a relief, they were a warning. Supplies were still reaching Japanese units somehow, which meant routes had shifted, likely closer to shore, under artillery cover. That meant if PT boats wanted kills, they would need to operate where escape was limited and reaction time measured in heartbeats. The next engagement came off Columbang. The geography was lethal: narrow channels, steep jungle rising straight from waterline, artillery emplacements hidden under foliage, invisible until they fired. PT-48 and PT-59 were tasked with probing the route. At 01:05 hours, muzzle flashes erupted from the shoreline before radar contact even resolved. Shells splashed dangerously close, forcing immediate withdrawal. The Japanese were no longer reacting, they were initiating. This forced a brutal reassessment. The 37mm cannon had given PT boats teeth, but not armor. One lucky hit from shore guns would still rip a wooden hull apart. Lynch and other commanders adapted again. Tactics tightened, distances shortened, coordination refined to near mathematical precision. Attacks became faster, harder, shorter. Strike, fire, withdraw before the enemy could respond. No prolonged engagements. No heroics. Survival was the objective, destruction the consequence. Psychologically, the pressure mounted. Sleep deprivation accumulated. Crews operated on caffeine, adrenaline, and instinct. Men began talking less. Jokes disappeared. Every patrol felt like rolling loaded dice. Yet, morale paradoxically held firm because results were undeniable. Japanese forces were starving. Prisoner interrogations confirmed that units inland were receiving less than half required rations. Ammunition shortages, worsening morale, collapsing. The cannon was doing more than sinking barges, it was strangling an army. By December, the Japanese attempted deception. Dummy barges, decoy convoys, empty holes rigged with explosives meant to lure PT boats into ambushes. One such decoy detonated prematurely, killing its own crew. Another succeeded, nearly crippling PT-46 when a booby-trapped barge exploded under cannon fire. 2 sailors injured. Lesson learned. From then on, PT boats fired, probing bursts first, never committing until secondary explosions or movement confirmed real cargo. The escalation reached its peak on December 2nd. Intelligence intercepted a major resupply run, the largest since October. 12 barges, multiple escorts, departure synchronized to move. This was not routine supply, this was desperation. Allied command authorized full commitment. 6 PT boats including PT-48 would attack in coordinated waves. Failure was not an option. The battle that followed lasted 17 minutes. It felt like hours. Cannon fire, machine guns, burning hulls, men screaming, engines, roaring explosions, overlapping until night itself seemed on fire. When it ended, 7 barges were destroyed, 3 damaged, 2 escaped. 1 PT boat limped home, barely afloat, another towed by its sister. No boats lost. 3 wounded. Japanese losses, catastrophic. After that night, the Tokyo Express was effectively broken in that sector. Supply runs shifted to submarines, airdrops, whatever could avoid surface exposure. Efficiency collapsed. Japanese offensive capability on Guadalcanal died quietly, not in a single dramatic battle, but through starvation, exhaustion, and isolation. For PT crews, there was no celebration, only exhaustion and the understanding that they had crossed a line of no return. The enemy now feared them, hunted them, prioritized their destruction. Survival rates depended entirely on discipline and speed. The cannon had made them deadly, but also valuable targets. Lieutenant Lynch wrote in his log that night, a single sentence. The enemy adapts, but we adapt faster. It was not bravado. It was fact-earned through blood and fire. The war was turning, not through grand fleet actions alone, but through nights like these small boats. Anonymous crews, improvised weapons, slowly choking an empire's lifeline. And the Japanese knew it. Their own reports used a new term for PT boats. Now not demon boats, but executioners of the night. Part 9 ends. Here at the moment where outcome becomes inevitable, but cost remains uncertain. Victory is visible on the horizon, but the sea has not finished collecting its price. By January 1943, the waters around Guadalcanal no longer belonged to the Imperial Japanese Navy, not completely, not safely, every night movement carried risk and every supply run became a gamble weighed against loss. The Tokyo Express had not vanished, but it had been crippled. Barges still moved, but fewer reached their destinations, and those that did arrived light, damaged, delayed. The war in the jungle was no longer being fed at the same pace, and armies without food, ammunition, or medicine do not advance, they wither. PT boats did not win Guadalcanal alone, but they accelerated its outcome. They shortened the enemy's endurance. They turned logistics into liability. And at the center of that transformation sat a weapon that had never been designed for boats, an aircraft cannon torn from wreckage, welded onto plywood decks by desperate men working against time. By February 1943, Japanese command acknowledged the reality they could no longer sustain large-scale operations on the island. Evacuation planning began quietly under cover of routine movements. When the final withdrawal occurred, Allied forces did not celebrate loudly because there was little to celebrate left. Guadalcanal was a graveyard. Aircraft burned along runways, ships rested upside down beneath the sea, and the jungle swallowed bodies without distinction of uniform or flag. For PT crews, there was no victory parade. Boats returned, scarred engines, worn crews, thinner than when they arrived. Patrols continued because war does not stop cleanly, it simply shifts. Some boats rotated out, others stayed and fought in new waters, carrying lessons learned in the Solomons. Forward, into New Guinea, the Philippines, the Mediterranean, and everywhere they went, the cannon went with them. The 37mm weapon that began as improvisation became doctrine. Not because it looked good on paper, but because it worked under fire. Because it solved a real problem in a real war, at the moment it mattered. It forced an enemy to change behavior. It reduced friendly casualties. It produced measurable results. Militaries respect nothing more than proof. Years later, analysts would write about innovation cycles, procurement failures, and battlefield adaptation. They would debate whether the Navy was lucky or smart to allow field modifications to spread. But none of those papers captured the reality faced by men like Lynch, Mitchell Frey, or Coogan. standing in darkness listening for engines, knowing that a single mistake meant burning alive on open water. The truth is simpler. War rewards those who adapt faster than the enemy. That night at Henderson Field, when a lieutenant stared at a wrecked fighter and saw not scrap but solution, the outcome of dozens of future engagements shifted. Not dramatically, quietly. Night by night, barge by barge, by the end of the war, PT boats had destroyed hundreds of enemy vessels, far more than early planners ever expected. Their reputation as fragile, expendable craft vanished. They became hunters, survivors, symbols of what ingenuity under pressure can achieve when bureaucracy steps aside long enough for necessity to lead. Many of the men who made it possible faded back into civilian life. No books, no speeches, no headlines, some carried scars, some carried silence. Their contribution lived on, in statistics, doctrine, and museum decks where visitors walk past cannons without knowing how close those weapons once were to never existing at all. History often remembers the battles, it rarely remembers the problems, the ones who looked at failure and refused to accept it as final. This story matters because it reminds us that wars are not only won by grand strategy, but by individuals who refuse to let bad math decide their fate. And if stories like this deserve to survive, then they need to be told, shared, preserved. That is why this channel exists. If you value deeply researched wartime history told with accuracy, respect, and context, consider subscribing. It ensures these forgotten chapters continue to reach new audiences instead of disappearing into archives. Thank you for staying till the end.